Two mysterious, cloaked figures lurk in the shadows, sneaking along dirt roads in 12th century Jerusalem. They're following an influential politician, an Italian who had just been named King of Jerusalem after a brief victory for the Christians during the Crusades. The king's entourage rounds a corner, and the cloaked men jump out and attack. One of the men is taken out by the guards, martyring himself. The other is captured while the king eventually succumbs to his injuries. If you think this sounds like something out of Assassin's Creed, you're right. But it also comes straight from the history books. Welcome back to Nutty History. Today, we're looking at the Nizari Ismaili, the real-life assassin cult that nearly toppled empires. At the height of their power in the 12th century, the Order of Assassins, otherwise known as the Nizari Ismailis, were conducting covert operations across the Middle East and the Levant, taking out influential leaders in stealth ambushes and long game-type infiltrations that would make the modern intelligence agencies blush. It all started with a guy named Hassan-i-Sabbah. Sabbah was an Ismaili, a sect of Shiite Islam. Ismailis were considered heretical by pretty much all other Muslim schools of thought, Shiites and Sunnis alike. The core disagreement between the Ismailis and the rest of Islam centered on a hereditary succession dispute from the 8th century AD. Fast forward to 1050 AD. Hassan-i-Sabbah was born in a city in what's now Iraq. He went to study in Cairo, then part of the Fatimid Caliphate, an Ismaili state that stretched across a good chunk of northern Africa. He converted to Ismailism while there, but eventually became irritated and disappointed that the Fatimid Ismailis were not trying hard enough to dominate the Muslim world. Sabbah split off and founded his own branch of Ismailism, called Nizari Ismailism, after Abu Mansur Nizar, the man Sabbah thought should have been the next caliph, but wasn't. Sabbah eventually took his followers from Egypt and set out north, towards modern-day Iran and Syria. The territory the newly formed Nizari set out into was controlled by the powerful Seljuk Empire, a vast Sunni Muslim state that stretched from modern-day Turkey in the west, through Syria and Iran, south into Yemen and north into the Stans, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. When Seljuk leaders caught wind that Sabbah and his followers were sneaking around in their territory, they were not pleased. But Sabbah had his sights set on Alamut Castle, a fortified stronghold in a remote part of Iran. From there, he thought he could begin his divine quest to conquer the Muslim world. In typical assassin fashion, Sabbah infiltrated the castle, disguised as a schoolteacher. Many other Nizaris had either also infiltrated the castle, or those already living there had been converted. The Nizaris were able to snatch Alamut from right under the Seljuks' noses. In 1090, it became their stronghold, from which they would expand further. The Nizaris captured a string of other castles in the region, using sly conversion tactics to persuade the local populations, who were growing restless under Seljuk rule, to let them come in and make things better. The castles they took were also located in rough, mountainous terrain, making them virtually impregnable. This kicked off what became known as the Nizari-Seljuk conflicts. The de facto sultan of the Seljuks at the time was Vizier Nizam al-Mulk. He was an influential politician, philosopher, and all-around intellectual type, a man many historians consider one of the most important statesmen in Islamic history. He led the Seljuks for 20 years, between 1072 and 1092. But to the Nizari, he was just in the way. In 1092, Sabbah sent one of his assassins to take out the Seljuk leader. Disguised in a Sufi mystic, the Nizari agent met al-Mulk as he was traveling to Baghdad, and in classic Nizari fashion, ended him by blade. With al-Mulk gone, the Seljuk Empire descended into civil conflict. It was one of the most influential assassins in geopolitical history. The Nizari were able to snatch up more fortresses, and by the early 1100s, they had spread into Syria. Sabbah sent one of his most trusted men, al-Hakim al-Munajim, known as the physician astrologer, to infiltrate Aleppo and the surrounding regions. The Nizari cell in Aleppo grew more and more powerful as the years went by, all the while using targeted assassinations, taking out hundreds of targets, and behind-the-scenes Game of Thrones type scheming to exert a whole lot of influence while basically having no military. All the while, for nearly 35 years, Hassan-i-Sabbah played puppeteer, orchestrating covert operation after operation from his stronghold in Alamut. It was said he rarely left the mountain fortress. He became known as the Old Man in the Mountain. He was a cult of personality and religious devotion. He made sure only the best, most devoted, most gifted, and courageous were chosen to Fadain, which was the term for the actual assassins in the Order of Assassins. The Old Man in the Mountain was smart. He knew the best way to preserve and grow his faith was through targeting the people at the top of the pyramid, the movers and shakers, and the Fadain played the long game. They would often be embedded for months or even years, gaining access to the inner circles of whoever they were assigned to take out. It's often assumed that the word assassin comes from hashish, and the original term hashashin comes from the fact that these Fadain would indulge in a bit of debauchery. To Sabbah and his successors, by showing the Fadain a good time in this life, a paradise on earth that involved days on end of partying and women, they could convince them that a similar paradise awaited them in the afterlife once they had completed their mission. It's a theory that was popularized by Marco Polo in his writings about the Nizari, and one that seems to be corroborated by the Chinese traveler and writer Cheng Da. The most succinct account comes from Cheng Da, who wrote, "The intoxicated, the Fadain, escorted him to a basement and entertained him with music and beauty. They let him indulge in sensual pleasure, and at the time he woke up, they taught him that if he could die as an assassin, he would live in joy and comfort like that." The Nizari continued to exert their influence after Hassan-i-Sabbah's death in 1024, but when Hassan II rose to power as leader of the Nizaris in 1162, things picked up steam again. Hassan II was a bit of a rebel when it came to Islam. He turned his back on Sharia law and was said to have literally turned his back to Mecca in a banquet which later led to his death, carried out by his brother. Hassan II's son, Muhammad II, succeeded him in 1166. But at this point, another man, considered the greatest assassin chief in Nizari history, started to make association great again. Rashid ad-Din Sinan was an alchemist and a schoolmaster who rose through the ranks. Under his rule from the Masya fortress in Syria, he took up the puppeteering mastery that the founder of the Nizari Ismailis, Hassan-i-Sabbah, started. He grew so powerful that he basically split the Nizaris in two, and Muhammad II, whose base was in Alamut, actually feared Sinan. Sinan became another iteration of the Old Man in the Mountain, and he trained his assassins well. A string of hits went out across the Middle East and Northern Africa, including the assassination of the King of Jerusalem in 1192 we mentioned at the top of the video. Sinan and his Fadain even tried to take out the great Ayyubid King Saladin, twice. Although they were unsuccessful, Saladin apparently started wearing chainmail everywhere he went. Sinan died in 1193, and in 1210, Hassan III rose to power as leader of the Nizaris. Hassan III had more Sunni sympathies, and he returned the Nizaris to more traditionally Islamic practices. But then, the Mongols came. In 1253, the Mongol general Kitbuka began a campaign against the assassin fortresses in Iran and Syria. The Nizaris were no match for the Mongol military strategy and gunpowder, and by 1273, the last of their fortresses fell. The assassins were no more. Their covert politicking and targeted hits were the reason they were able to gain such a strong foothold in the region. But their lack of numbers and a lack of a standing army ultimately did them in. They built a state almost purely through targeted attacks and strategic alliances. And they managed it all by ending way less lives than pretty much every other state in the history of the world. There are two sides to every coin, though. The subterfuge and promise of paradise for sacrificing yourself in a very high-risk line of work is something that persists to this day. What else do you want to know about the real-life inspiration behind Assassin's Creed? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Nutty History.